There is not different muscles, there is one big muscle that is the body.
So welcome to this episode of Finding Your Range with me, Jeannie, a movement therapist who specialises in hypermobility, EDS and chronic pain. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be speaking to, well, I'm happy to say a good friend of mine, but also an amazing movement educator and teacher. So please welcome Ana Barretxeguren. And I'm just going to read out her bio because she's done so many things. I don't want to miss any of them. So I'm just going to read out and then we'll get chatting to Ana. So Ana is a movement educator, Pilates teacher, and myofascial release practitioner. Through self-enquiry, a passion for anatomy, and her extensive work helping people recover from injury, she has created Moving Fascia, which is a movement method based on self-release, embodiment, and movement techniques developed from the latest fascial research. Her own struggle with Catamenial Pneumothorax, I hope I said that right, Ana, you can correct me if I said that wrong. This is a rare condition where a woman experiences repetitive lung collapses, has led Ana to a continuous investigation of fascia, focusing on the visceral space and its connections to breath and movement. Ana also holds a postgraduate certificate in anatomical sciences from the University of Edinburgh and has over 500 hours of human dissection research in the dissection lab. She has extensive clinic practice as a myofascial release and visceral manipulation practitioner and has been an educator in various Pilates teacher trainings for the past 12 years. Ana founded Evolve Movement Education in 2013, and she is the owner of Brighton Pilates Studio, a Pilates and health centre in Brighton. Wow, I can take a breath now. Talking of breath, that was a lot, wasn't it, to read out? Ana's done so much in a short space of time. So can't wait to speak to you, Ana. Welcome. We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Jeannie. It's always a pleasure to see you and to speak to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And, you know, our listeners won't know, but we've been friends for many, many years. And actually, when it says Ana was teaching at a Pilates training, that's how I met Ana. So when I was training at Polestar Pilates, which many of you know I've trained with, Ana was there and she was one of my mentors. So, you know, she's helped me in my journey. So we became friends then. So, which was, gosh, when was that? That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. A lot has happened since.
Yeah, a long time ago, 9 years ago. So I mentioned there, Ana, about your rare condition, and I do hope I pronounced that correctly. So Ana, could you tell us about your condition, your rare condition that we mentioned in your bio?
So catamenial pneumothorax is a rare condition that is often related to endometriosis. So it's a woman-only condition, and in this rare condition, the woman experiences a lung collapse repetitively, and the lung collapse is either during the menstruation period or during ovulation, most commonly during menstruation. Mm-hmm. It is probably not as rare as it is thought to be, due to the fact that there are, you know, many women that have got the condition and haven't been diagnosed. It takes a while for the practitioners to realize that this is what the woman is experiencing. It is not really fully understood how this happens. There are various theories about how the endometrial cells, which are the cells that are meant to be lining the womb, mm-hmm. End up in the thoracic cavity. But what happens is that those endometrial cells end up in the lining of the lungs, in the pleura, and during the hormonal changes that come with the cycle, those cells start to bleed. So the woman then develops a lung collapse and difficulty breathing.
Goodness.
Yeah, it is.
So,
yeah.
So obviously the lung collapses and difficulty breathing. Is this one of the things that inspired you to really start to look into breath and movement? Because I know, it's a huge passion of yours.
Yeah, I had obviously already been in a journey of looking at breath as I was a Pilates teacher already. I was a myofascial release practitioner and a visceral manipulation practitioner, and breath was something that already truly fascinated me. I had also other reasons for having investigated breath personally, even from other, I suffer from Crohn's disease as well. This didn't arrive at the first pneumothorax I had came at the age of 36, but by then I had a lifetime of living with chronic illness. So yes, and then so the passion of coming into researching breath and researching the body, it actually came very early on in my 20s, when I realized that in order for me to find health or to tap into my own health, I really needed to look at my movement and look at my breath. But obviously, when I developed my first pneumothorax, and then I started going into this full cycle of lung collapse after lung collapse after lung collapse, it was a complete awakening and realization to explore breath at a much deeper level. It was almost, a calling to come into, really dive into it.
Wow. And just so our listeners can get an idea, how often have you experienced that, approximately? How often does that happen?
So at the beginning, my first pneumothorax came after a very traumatic emergency operation that I had to have due to scar tissue and my Crohn's, complications from my scar tissue. Mm-hmm. So it was an emergency operation. It was a very traumatic event. And I experienced my first pneumothorax about 10 days after the op. And at first, obviously, no one knew why I was getting this pneumothorax. I didn't actually get diagnosed until about a year later, when I had very many. And in the first few years of having this, I had a pneumothorax each month, each time I had my menstruation. And since then, I have stopped counting. Some have been big, some have taken me to hospital. Sometimes I know that I probably have a pneumothorax, but it's small enough that I can manage it conventionally at home and just lay down and rest and do some breathing techniques. Wow. I have stopped, I don't know how many. Yeah. I am a lot older than 36, that's for sure.
Yeah. Goodness. But still, very, very scary situation to be in, I guess, when it was first happening. But as you know, breathing is a passion of mine. It's my first principle in my movement method for hypermobility, and we'll go into a little bit more about that. But before we get into that, what are the primary breathing muscles that we need to be thinking of or aware of that could help the listeners understand a little bit more about their breathing patterns?
So obviously we can go into talking about breathing muscles and the physicality of breath. I think whenever we go into looking at breath, we have to, before we start talking about muscles, I would like to say that we breathe as a whole, that our whole body goes through a process of expansion and contraction, and that therefore us focusing on those primary breathing muscles has to be done with the head of someone that is focusing on something and narrowing our vision into them. And of course that is important, but to have an understanding that the whole body breathes. We are a full organism that has developed from the inside out. So our connective tissue is a continuum, so that we cannot really isolate one muscle of breath. Now, of course, in our research of breath is important.
Yes.
that we come to understand the mechanisms that are brought into breath, and we can go quite specific, but I do think that it's important to, before we go into those, to just kind of have a sense of how the whole body breathes as a whole, and every muscle in the body and every cell in the body probably feels the tidal changes of the breath.
That's so beautiful. And you just said there, I think you said we grew from the inside out. So we breathe from the, is that what you said, inside out?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I am really interested in embryonic development, and especially in those first few weeks of our development from fertilization, and how we could go into a whole other podcast talking about embryology, but it's, I think, really an important idea to keep in mind that we begin as one. We begin as one cell, and that cell is already a body. That cell is already our body. And we then start to go through a process of first multiplication. We become mad. We create more and more and more cells until we've got to begin to specialize. And then we go through a process of specialization in which the cells divide into different germ layers, so layers that are going to be specializing into becoming different tissues, which will become different organs, which will become different systems. So we could carry on talking about that, but the idea that then those cells and those layers, which are not really layers, but they are interconnected, they begin to fold on themselves. And by folding onto ourselves, we start to become this complicated organism that we are. But right at the beginning, there was already a pulse. So there was already a pulse. That original cell is already, in a sense, we're already a pulsing being, a pulsing organism that becomes multicellular, and incredibly intelligently specialized and developed. Yet we are a whole. So when we're looking at breath, we're not just looking at the muscles of respiration. Yet I think it is important, and I would like to talk about those muscles of respiration yet.
But the fact is that breath basically impacts everything. It's not a one-dimensional action where we inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth or whatever we might be doing. It's not like that, is it? It's not linear. It's basically, it impacts everything, which, I think we can all see Anna's passion for this topic and coming through. So, and I'm really interested in this because with hypermobility, and I'm sure it's not just hypermobility, but I see it a lot in my clients, largely because we've been in pain a lot of the time, a bit like yourself, learning to live with pain, being fearful of movement, being fearful of hurting ourselves. We tend to develop breathing pattern disorders. Maybe we don't exhale fully, we can't inhale fully. What would be the implications long-term of not breathing correctly, of having a breathing pattern disorder?
So perhaps the first thing to look at is to talk a bit about those main muscles of respiration that we were talking about, that we kind of avoided the question by saying that we breathe as a whole. But so we could separate in that there are parts of us that are more involved in our in-breath, in our expansion, and there are parts of us that are more involved in our contraction, in our out-breath, in our coming back inwards. So now this pulse is a balance, and we have to have a complete rhythm of relationship between the expansion and the contraction. In our main breathing in muscles, the main one will be the diaphragm, which is our that internal membrane-like musculature structure that separates the thorax from the abdomen. We have other muscles of inhalation, like or in-breath, which are the external intercostals and a lot of the upper musculature of our sternocleidomastoid, our scalenes, all those neck muscles that lift the ribs in order to increase the capacity within the thorax so that the lungs can expand.
Fascinating.
In terms of an out-breath, the out-breath tends to be less involved in general because the lungs have got a tendency to collapse. A lung wants to collapse. A lung is only expanded into the side of the rib cage due to the fact that there is a vacuum relationship between the tissues that line the lung and the tissues that line the inside of the thorax. So the lung is almost sucked into the ribs. So the in-breath and the expansion of the thoracic cavity and the expansion of the diaphragm dropping down will create more suction of the lungs out, which will create more expansion. But the lungs actually want to come back in. But we can, of course, encourage the exhalation through breathing out with a little bit more emphasis. And in there, we will be involving structures like some of the other deeper intercostals, the internal intercostals, and some of the abdominal musculature as well. But like I was saying before, this is a very simplistic resume of what is an in-breath and an out-breath.
Yes.
When we suffer from chronic pain, often there are many levels to this. There are many levels to why we will see different disorders in the breathing patterns, and we will see will have implications. You know, how hypermobility or the other chronic illnesses will have implications in our breath.
Yes.
There are many levels to it, and a big important level will be stress and the high levels of stress that a person under so much pain is having to endure. And how that stress is going to be creating a change in our autonomic response, in our sense of being, and how that is going to create a stress response that is going to sort of upregulate our nervous system to be completely, constantly on the alert mode, and that's going to start to innervate more those sort of sympathetic fibers, and the sense of alert is going to engage more that probably upper neck musculature, and so that will be maybe one level. But also when we are in pain, we kind of want to avoid moving. You know, a deep in breath will lower the diaphragm down into the abdomen. With a deep in breath that is a sort of rested breath down into the abdomen, the abdominal organs are going to feel the motion of the diaphragm dropping. And those abdominal organs are going to need to have that room to be able to expand. That's going to be felt in the organs of the abdomen, but it's going to be felt lower down. It's also going to be felt through the fluid relationships within the spine. If you think, we often think of the spine as a very mechanical column, but there's a lot of fluid that needs to be transferred through those areas. If you're in a state of pain, probably those tiny movements of our inside will not feel comfortable. We might have inflammation in our gut due to, I know that with hypermobility, this is also quite common.
Absolutely.
We might have, hypertonic musculature in our lumbar region that is holding, because if it's not holding, it feels like everything is going to collapse. So why will this musculature want to let go and become all fluid? It just doesn't make sense. So our nervous system is alert and is thinking, okay, well, it hurts, so therefore I'm not going to lower my diaphragm. I'm not going to get that deep breath. That could be another reason for it.
I can just picture all our listeners sitting there nodding now, because that just makes so much sense. You drew a perfect picture of, I think, of what goes on for so many people with hypermobility or chronic pain sufferers.
I think there are other levels as well. You know, there are also changes in the tidal volume and of your lung, the lungs, the capacity.
The tidal volume, just in case people don't know what that is. What is that?
Sure. Well, the volume of if you think your breath as a tide.
Okay.
You think of your breath as the tide, yeah, the coming in of the wave and the coming in of the tide and the living, and how we change the volume of our capacity to expand and our capacity to come back in.
Yes.
Yes. So if there is a change to that barrier of how much I expand and how much I come back in, that's going to have a deeper influence, not just in the changes of the mechanics of our ribs and our diaphragm dropping, our organs moving, but also deeper into our chemistry. Because if I am not getting a certain level of oxygen and carbon dioxide balance, that's going to start to change also the way that the signaling in my brain. So there is a deep part of our brain in what is called the medulla oblongata. So there's the deep root of our brain, which is in charge. Is where our nucleus for reading there's chemoreceptors there. There are receptors that are reading the chemistry of our blood, let's say, how much carbon dioxide and how much oxygen we have.
Yes.
And the relationship there can get a little broken. We can start to believe, and this is at such a subconscious level, no one can access that. It's deep in our reptile brain.
Yes.
We can start to believe that we haven't got enough oxygen. Therefore, we then start to get stuck in a pattern of hyperventilation.
I was going to say, yes, that's such a big deal as well for a lot of people. Hyperventilation. That's amazing. Wow.
So it is a difficult, really difficult, complicated pattern to break, or we can get stuck in this. Yeah.
And then it just, like you say, it becomes a pattern. And you've got to somehow break that pattern, retrain it. But,
exactly.
But I think becoming aware that you do that is the first step as well, because so many people don't even realize, because it's become the norm that they maybe breathe up here quite shallowly, or, that's how they breathe. So they don't know there's another alternative. And I think part of what we do as movement therapists is to really introduce people to a new experience of their breath, which is very powerful, and very emotional. And now it makes sense why sometimes people will just burst into tears when they take an exhale, because all of those responses are letting go. So, it's beautiful. I love how you talk about the breath. I think it's so nice, and it makes so much sense. And we touched on this earlier. I watched a webinar that you did with a colleague of ours, Julian Baker, who hopefully will come on the show as well at some point. But you said in that webinar that the whole body breathes, and it just really stood out to me. I thought that was such a beautiful expression. Can you just explain to us again? I know you've already talked about it, but just give us a little bit more about that.
I think you touched on something really important when you were just mentioning how sometimes through the tapping into our breath, especially if this is a new experience, people can experience a real emotional release. So I think, you're quoting me saying the whole body breathes, and now about the body expanding and contracting, but there are so many levels to us as human. Maybe I should say the whole human breathes, because what is a body? And that's another conversation, a bit deep there. But there are so many aspects to what I am. So I am a physical being, and, you know, I can talk about my expansion and my contraction, but of course I cannot separate my physicality from my emotion. I cannot separate my physicality from my emotion. I cannot separate my emotion from my story of what happened to me, especially for people that, you know, like us, have gone through experiencing a lifetime of chronic illness. I cannot separate my, you know, we could even talk about spirit. There are many levels to the being.
Yes.
So the whole being breathes, and breath, perhaps for me, I see it as, and it's a bit of a cliche to use these words that I'm using, but breath can be, it is a continuum, it is a pulsing, like we were talking before, but it's also a portal. For me, it is the portal, it's the gateway, it's the vessel that can communicate my conscious with my unconscious. So I constantly breathe. I took my first breath. You took your first breath when I was born. Yeah, you took yours when you were born, Jeannie. Sorry, no one else would. We take our first breath as we're, you know, brought into the world. We arrive into the world with an in-breath, and we leave the body with an out breath. So it's a continuum practice, and most of that time that I am practicing to breathe, I am completely unaware that I am doing this, but I am doing it, for sure doing it. Even for those listeners of yours right now that are, you know, living with a lifetime of hypermobility, and how many times they probably have been told, oh, it's because you don't breathe. No, you do breathe, because otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. So you do. But it's that ability of our consciousness of our breath to bring in the consciousness. We can change the way that we breathe. We can breathe autonomically. We can breathe without paying attention, but we can then come in and breathe what is called cortical breathing. Cortical, because we are utilizing the cortical part of our brain, the cortex of our brain, which is where our conscious motor, we can control the motion of our body, so we can control the motion of our breath. So through, like you were saying, coming to tap into our own breath and paying attention to our breath, we can bring the unconscious into the conscious. As we bring, I don't know that I breathe just here. I don't know that I go around life like this. And then I sit there and I do a bit of breathing, and then suddenly I realize that, oh my God, I'm letting go of something that I did never know that I was holding. And it's really through the breath that we get there.
I mean, it's such a powerful thing, and yet, you know, I just don't think it gets enough attention, which is why I wanted to have you on the show. And, you know, this is all about uncovering things that we maybe don't talk about. And, you know, breath, I don't think gets enough. When you're talking about it, you're like, wow, it does so many. Obviously, breathing is important, obviously, like you say, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But it's so much more than that. It does so much and influences so much. And yet, certainly in my Pilates training, I didn't get taught any of this. It was like you learn to inhale when you do, what is it? Inhale to prepare, exhale to move, inhale to exhale. And you're so focused, should I be inhaling, exhaling, inhale? It's just, that's not movement. That's not movement when I'm so making it so mechanical. How can it be so mechanical when it's so deep and, you know, I think it's just beautiful, and it doesn't get enough attention. So thank you for sharing all of this with us. So we've kind of touched on this about anxiety and stress. You brought up stress, and I think we kind of covered it, but the fact that breath does become an indicator of how we're feeling, you know, that's true, right? It will show if we're upset, if we're stressed, if we're happy. the breath will respond to those emotions. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's an indicator, it's a thermometer of our emotion. So much can be expressed through the breath. In fact, I don't know if you've experienced this. I hope it's okay. I'm going to share something a bit personal. I didn't really think I was going to share this, but it's just come up, and I feel that.
Well, thank you.
So today my dad has gone into hospital with COVID. This morning I got the news that he went into hospital, and my mom was hiding it from me because I'm obviously in a different country, but I heard it in her breath. I heard the anxiety in her breath. And this is not because I am some enlightened being that I can hear things like this, but we know when we are very in touch with someone, especially through a phone call, we can hear the way that they are breathing, the way that they are producing sound, which is also related to their own breath, as well as their vocal cords and other things are, of course, involved with the production of sound. But it really very much shows our anxiety, our own fear can show in the way that we are breathing. So breath is a thermometer, so that it can really indicate our state of being. It can tell us about our emotion, and then at the same time, through breath, as much as breath does show our state of being and our emotion, it is through our breath that we are also able to change our reality, our sense of how it is, our experience of what it which is our own choice. That is something that we can definitely get to do through our breath.
Yes.
But definitely our breath does show our anxiety. It shows our memories. It shows our story. It has a lot of information if you want to listen to it.
Yeah. And like you say, it's just a training or being present in that breath, of noticing it, being conscious of your breath. Because so many times, like you say, we go about our daily lives, we don't even think about it. Unless we have problems, like I've had pneumonia 3 times, and suddenly breathing becomes a really big issue. You can't breathe, so you start to pay attention.
You have to pay attention, don't you? Yeah.
And you realize suddenly how important it is.
I'm always very, of course, having catamenial pneumothorax, I'm not happy to have this condition, but I'm always very grateful to the fact that it's a repetitive, constant rhythm that reminds me of it reminds me that I am alive. Even I am, even if I have difficulty breathing, I am still here. I am taking an in-breath, whatever quality of breath that is. So it reminds me that I am alive. And it does remind me how much my breath has got the capacity to change my reality, my physical reality. Change does, happen. Our breath has got the capacity to change our form, and also it has the capacity to change my emotional reality, my sense of being in the world.
Yes, very nice. And I know we spoke about this a little bit, and it probably comes down to stress as well. That in hypermobility, people often say to me, I don't feel like I can get enough air in. Or what I observe when I'm with the clients is that when they exhale, the ribs don't actually move. So you were saying that the lungs, they want to collapse in a way. So as you exhale, there should be this sort of softening down of the ribs, and everything kind of spreads out. But oftentimes when we exhale, this bit doesn't move. So the lower rib cage just kind of stays there. Why would that be? What's going on there that's just kind of stuck?
Well, obviously I leave it for researchers and hypermobility experts as yourself to go and explain what is happening with people with hypermobility. But my explanation of it would be that well, one, the factor that we were talking about earlier on in our conversation about how much the nervous system is going to avoid breathing into something that is going to be causing pain. So if moving those ribs is going to be causing pain,
yes,
that could be one reason. If moving that diaphragm, if expanding and contracting is going to be giving me pain, I will avoid it and then therefore get, like you say, stuck.
yes,
often people I see, either they, most of us are either stuck on an in-breath or we are stuck on an out-breath. And the person that you are describing, it sounds like someone that is stuck on an in-breath. The ribs kind of got to the expansion and then I don't want to come back in.
yes.
Maybe coming back in was painful. Is that an experience of pain in a physical way, or is it, something
Emotional.
deeper and emotional as well, which could also be? There are many different reasons why that might be, but that's definitely many factors. But I think that definitely that is something that does happen.
Yes.
When people are more stuck on a sort of pattern of like, I can't get enough air in, the first example that you gave,
yes,
that sometimes could be due to too much contraction. But I think that a lot of the time, that is more the response of someone that is actually suffering from hyperventilation. So we get stuck in this rhythm of, I don't have enough air. I don't have enough air.
yes.
And that is more at a subconscious level in that response from those chemoreceptors and mechanoreceptors, the chemoreceptors that are in the deep brain.
Yes.
In the brain stem. So that there is almost like at a subconscious level an understanding of our system that we don't have enough in-breath, that we don't have enough oxygen.
Yes.
And that is down to the chemistry of our blood. So that's much, that is a very complicated pattern that nevertheless is something that we can definitely break through doing some breath work.
Good. Yes.
Not necessarily, but training the in-breath, but perhaps in this case by training the out-breath. So I feel like I can get enough air in. Well, it might be that we have to actually come back to the exhale and training the out-breath in order to be able to expand more.
Yeah.
But that is a really there's a lot of research around hyperventilation, and there is a lot of research around it in terms of like the different responses that happen within the nervous system and the chemistry and different changes to the buffering that happens in the kidneys. There's a lot of research around that is highly interesting to read, but also to explore in our teaching of movement as well.
Absolutely. And I think, it's really encouraging for our listeners that you mentioned that we can change these patterns. We don't have to stay with these patterns and these feelings. It is changeable through, like you say, breath work, movement work. So, take heart if you're listening to this and you're like, well, that's how I breathe, I do that. Things can change. So take heart in that.
Absolutely. And one thing also, maybe I can't change my condition. And I feel like I have a little bit of, I can sort of talk to the hypermobile community a little bit from a sort of chronic illness experience, although I don't have hypermobility. And I know how, I know firsthand how it feels when someone tells you, oh, well, that's just your reality and you can change your reality and that's how it is. And and we have a choice. Of course, I cannot get rid of my, repetitive lung collapses. is what I do with those lung collapses. That is my own choice. And it's absolutely fine to, of course, dwell in my own sorrow and my own self-pity when I'm in the middle of my lung collapse.
Yeah.
Yet actually to come to sort of, but yet there's always a lot of health until the moment we die. There is a lot of health, even when I am struggling to breathe.
Yeah.
Even when I am in a lot of pain, where is my health? Can I tap into that health? And then from the health, I can try.
That's a nice way of putting it. That's really nice. Can we move on to a big topic certainly for our listeners? And I've experienced issues myself, so it's a personal issue for me. Pelvic floor and breath. Now, I know that they're related, and the diaphragm and the pelvic floor work together, but could you explain a little bit more about that relationship? And largely because a lot of us, me included, had or have a hypertonic pelvic floor, so we have a lot of tension in there, and yet we're told to do Kegel exercises, pelvic floor contractions, because people don't realize that it's hypertonic, so they think we've got weak pelvic floors, let's strengthen it up. And then, of course, things get worse because you're trying to train a muscle that's already fatigued and it's just going to let you down. So for me, the thing that really helped with my pelvic floor was breath work and actually understanding this relationship. Could you explain it to us a little bit more about how they work together?
Sure. So when we earlier were talking about the diaphragm moving down, in a very simplistic way of understanding, or a very simple way of explaining it, more than understanding, a very simple way of explaining it, the diaphragm, as the diaphragm is drawing down, is increasing the thoracic capacity, so the thorax increases its volume, and the abdomen is then going to be compromised because the diaphragm is coming down. Now, the thorax has a communication with the outside through the mouth and the nose, so it can change its volume, and it can also change its shape, and it can also change its volume, whereas the abdomen cannot change its volume as such. It can change its shape, but it's actually an enclosed chamber. So in that enclosed chamber of the abdomen, there is a lot of soft fluid. You think of the organs, we need to really feel and sense that the organs within our abdomen are going to be fluidly moving as the diaphragm is dropping down. And there's going to be a change to the walls of that chamber and also the floor of that chamber. So that we could sense how the organs, as we're taking an in-breath, are going to be expanding forwards into the abdomen, sideways into the abdomen, and back into the back wall of the abdomen. But also they're going to be having an important sense of being able to drop down towards the pelvis. So there needs to be, and when I'm talking about drop down or expand, there's a tiny, they're not big movements, they're tidal motions of our inside. So the pelvis is therefore needing to be able to receive this motion of how there is an expansion when there is an in-breath, and then there is a drawing up and a contraction when there is an out-breath. But like we were talking about earlier, the actual action is the in-breath, and the out-breath, in the out-breath, there is less intention. Of course, we can force the exhalation and therefore engage all the abdominal musculature and get a little bit more involved. But the out-breath is an out-breath at rest. The lung wants to collapse. It just happens. The diaphragm releases and the out-breath happens. So to train our pelvic floors to constantly contract in the action of the exhalation, or to actually constantly contract at all times, is questionable. So the pelvis has its own in-breath and its own out-breath. So that's at one level. In terms of the pelvic floor, which we could say more than a pelvic floor. Perhaps we could use different words like pelvic diaphragm or pelvic hammock. It needs to be an expansion and a contraction as much as anything else is an expansion and a contraction. With the idea that we were talking earlier of the body being a whole, the being being a whole. If the pelvic floor or the pelvic diaphragm is in a constant contraction, then obviously there is something that is not functioning properly there. And this is such a kind of fluid mechanical relationship between the pelvic floor and the diaphragm. But our pelvis is highly affected also by our autonomic nervous system and our state of mind. So again, you know, any stress, as much as we contract through the shoulders, we are going to be holding down there. So any pain is going to take us towards this constant holding of the inside.
Some of our listeners, that will be a really, really chronic condition that interferes with their everyday life, you know. The pelvic floor, the pain that they experience in the pelvic floor area stops them living a normal life, unfortunately. And we work constantly to find ways to help them, you know, recognize that, release that through breath. But I guess it becomes one of those patterns again, that the pelvic floor just, as soon as there's any kind of change, it just wants to contract again. It's such a deep muscle group, isn't it? That it's very, very, very tricky to talk to it, I guess, you know, to kind of communicate with it.
Yes, and it comes to the fact that we need to get to it through tapping into our subconscious. It's not something that we can consciously change. We can become conscious that we do it.
Yes.
But we cannot change it consciously. So I believe breath is that portal, as I was saying earlier, that takes us to be able to kind of move from these two realms of what I do consciously and what I unconsciously do.
Nice.
So breath is one way of getting there for the pelvis, for sure.
Yeah. And this kind of leads on to my next question, core stability training. You know, the old, been around for a long, long time, but sucking your pelvic floor, brace your abdominals and do that for an hour in your Pilates class. You know, Pilates, unfortunately, is well known for that. It's not something I ever taught because it never seemed right to me. I didn't understand why I had to suck in my pelvic floor for an hour of my Pilates class and then forget about it for the rest of the week. Or are we supposed to hold it in for the whole 24/7? And, you know, it didn't make sense. So I never, you know, I wanted to know more about how we as a whole operate. So what do you think of this whole core stability training? The core, what is the core? You know, is it the pelvic floor? You know, I know this is a whole other topic, but
yes, this is a whole episode, Jeannie. We have to do another one on what is the core.
I know, but what do we think of the core stability, that I should be holding my pelvic floor, bracing my abdomen, and then trying to exercise of any kind?
So Pilates is a fantastic movement method that we both trained in and we both have loved for years. But as any method and as any technique, it's got its limits. It has its limits. So, I mean, then we could go into different conversations because, of course, there are many Pilates teachers like yourself and myself that don't teach in this way. But it is something, and you know, luckily, the Pilates community is also changing and beginning to realize that this is perhaps not so effective and not so functional. We cannot, it's not possible for us to isolate isolate one muscle. The muscles, they didn't kind of get put in. Like we said earlier, as we grow from the inside out, then there is not different muscles. There is one big muscle that is the body, and in our intention to understand it, we come to separate it into different compartments. There are different muscles, but actually they're all interconnected through our connective tissue. So the body works like an orchestra, and sometimes the trumpets are playing and sometimes they quieten down to let the trombone take over. So yes, sometimes of course there's going to be some more deeper connection coming into a certain particular area. But it doesn't really make sense to bring all our attention to one famous muscle that is the latest trend, and then just focus on this one muscle. With this idea of just contracting the pelvic floor, or lifting it, and any Kegel, it has its place. It has its place in very specific situations. But first of all, we have to really understand, who are we teaching this to, and why are we teaching this? What is our intention? And if we are coming across, situations like some of the people that you were talking about earlier, that are living their life through with pelvic pain, or there are lots of different labels that we could, that might not actually be the most effective thing to do. And this contraction, let's remember, is also not part of our conscious motor response, because these are fast twitch fibers that these muscles have, so that they are actually doing more of a constant stability. They have more of a constant stability emphasis, rather than a muscle like your biceps.
And relating that to breath, of course, if you're holding the pelvic floor and drawing in the transversus, we're always told transversus abdominis, how can we breathe? Like, we've been talking about breath for nearly an hour and how wonderful it is and how the whole body breathes. But if I'm bracing here and then I'm asked to do whatever exercise, how the breath can't really flow as it might be intended to do in a natural way.
Yes, and that's going to have a lot of implications, not just for our musculature, but also for our organs, for our glands, for our lymphatics, for everything that actually needs to go through that constant pulse of the expansion and the contraction, and the expansion and the contraction, and again and again, and that repetition. And we are stuck in. We're training people to get stuck in one place. So yes, it won't be able, if we just hold in the transversus, we won't be able to fully expand and breathe. And why would we want to do that, especially with population that, with people that are in chronic pain? What is the value of that? It does really come to question.
The really interesting thing is, you said that, is that when people come to see me and they, maybe I've been taught to do that in other methods, other people have taught them this. It's just a very common thing, isn't it, that you've been taught to do the pelvic floor bracing. So when I actually stop them doing that, pain starts to dissipate. Because all of a sudden the flow comes back. We can start to move naturally. We're not binding things down anymore with tension. Because I always think we're kind of interfering with the natural workings of our body. We're kind of imposing our will on something that the body is so intelligent, it knows exactly what to do. And yet we're telling it, well, no, hold this muscle here, hold this muscle here. And, it's just messing everything up. I think you just mess up the whole system. So when you stop doing, in a lot of cases, you stop all of that pelvic floor bracing and you actually start to breathe, and the pain just suddenly starts to disappear. So for me, that's got to be a good thing, right? That's got to mean that the body is happier not doing it.
Yes.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Anna. So I know it's a little bit cheeky, but I wanted to ask you whether you would share with us any tips or a visualization or something, that our listeners could experience from you. Is there anything that you could share with us now that?
Sure, happy to.
That would be great. Yes. That's a real treat, actually. So thank you.
Honor that you ask, and there are many things we could do. Like anything that we've just shared is really about tapping into our own experience of the breath. So I could share with everyone listening just a little bit of an internalizing of our own felt sense, very much your experience, separate to what I will feel or someone else.
Yes.
And I like to use visualization, so I like to use the physical being and our own embodiment of our own anatomy in order to have perhaps a separate sense of our reality. So perhaps we can do that with the breath, breathing into our heart, which is something that people don't often think about, and we haven't really come to talk about this, but the heart is embedded into our diaphragm, so the heart actually feels every single in-breath and every single out-breath as a massage, or it doesn't, because the diaphragm might lift or it might drop or not.
Yes. That sounds
so
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So maybe just sitting there wherever it is you are, and if this is a podcast, so if you are listening from your car and you are driving and you are going to join, maybe join later or pull over.
Yeah, pull over now.
Pull over now. Don't do this while you're driving, especially. So finding that if you are sitting, perhaps noticing what it is that you are sitting on, just seeing if you can feel the hardness of the chair underneath you or the floor, or if it's soft and it's a sofa, maybe finding a way of sitting in which you can direct the weight onto the center of your sitting bones in order to feel that you're able to lift up from there. And then if it helps to close your eyes, then allowing your eyes to close so that you can travel inwards, bring your attention to how it is that it feels to breathe for you right now. So first of all, not trying to change anything, yet only just sensing what your breath tells you about today, about now, about this moment. Maybe that is hard to stop and sense how it feels to breathe, or it might be that it's easy. Notice how long it takes you to breathe in. Sense how long it takes you to breathe out. And sense whether there is a rhythm there. And as you are coming to tap into this rhythm, which is your own rhythm, notice how every time you take a breath, there is an expansion. And like we were saying, this is an expansion of your whole being. But we're going to narrow our attention to an expansion of our thorax. Notice how your thorax, your chest, opens and expands sideways in an in-breath. And it drops and comes back towards your center in an out-breath. Perhaps in the next cycle of breath, notice how not only the breath sends the ribs sideways, but also there is more of a space between the front and the back of you. Your breastbone travels gently forwards as your spine travels gently back as you breathe in. And how as you exhale, you just become that little narrower. The sides of you, the front of you, the back of you come back towards your center. And notice how that expansion also happens towards the top and the base of that thorax. So as you are breathing in, the top of your breastbone gently lifts forwards and up. And there's a sense of perhaps the lower ribs at your back are expanding backwards, and you might feel that you're able to breathe into your lumbar spine. They kind of have a sense of how you can breathe into your lower back. And how everything softens, especially your shoulders, your upper thorax, as you breathe out. So taking a couple more cycles of an in-breath and an out-breath to tap into this. Notice how that expansion doesn't just happen to the outside, but also the lungs expand inwards. So in your next in-breath, just notice how when you breathe in, your lungs breathe in towards your heart. Feel their spongy cotton wool texture, quality coming to caress your heart in an in-breath. Feel how with your inhalation you are coming to gently massage your heart as you breathe in, and how as you can feel the lungs retrieving away from the heart, giving a little bit more space for the lungs, for the heart to raise as you exhale. This might be easy or maybe not accessible to you. So if this is not something you can picture, then go back to some of the other ideas that might have resonated with you a bit more. But if that felt okay, then taking another couple of in-breaths and out-breaths without trying to breathe in really deep or forcing anything. Just calmly sensing how every time you're breathing in, you are hugging the heart with your lungs. Every time you're exhaling, your heart gently lifts and it actually travels forwards and up a little bit. Breathing in, the heart drops a little, the lungs come to gently hug and caress the heart. Breathing out, the heart lifts and the lungs get away to let the heart travel forwards and up. And taking a little bit more time to carry on going through this practice, noticing how that feels for you, maybe not just in your chest, maybe elsewhere in the body. And then slowly letting the breath be soft. Come back to a place of only just paying attention as a non-looker without intending to change anything. How you feel. Let's bring ourselves back into the room gently by either opening the eyes or wriggling around a little bit. That was simple tapping into how we can change our breath by paying attention to it.
That was so beautiful. That was so beautiful. Thank you, Anna. That was so nice to focus on the heart as well and visualizing the lungs coming in and hugging the heart. It was beautiful. I feel quite relaxed now. So if my voice has dropped and my breath has got a little slower, everyone listening, that's why. I just feel very grounded, I guess the word is, and very, that was really nice. Thank you so much, Anna. I hope everyone enjoyed that. If nobody's fallen asleep, of course, because it was very calming, you might feel that you can have a little nap now, just settle into that. That's beautiful. Oh, well, I've really, really enjoyed our time, Anna. And
me too, Jeannie.
Thank you for sharing all your passion with our listeners. How can people learn more about your work? Where can they find you if they want to learn a little bit more about what you do?
Well, I suppose they could go to my website. I run Evolve Movement Education. Yeah. So they can go to evolvemovementeducation.com, and there are different things that they can learn about me there. Or they can look, if they can spell my surname, they can look for me online, and then they might get to find me on Facebook and Instagram and other places. But yeah, Evolve Movement Education is the place to go. Yeah,
and Anna's on all social media, so don't worry, we'll spell your name in the notes
correctly. Yes.
Find you. Don't worry. Oh, thank you so much, Anna, for joining us. And I hope you all enjoyed that. And I certainly learned so much about the anatomy of the breath and some really beautiful visualizations. So let us know what you think. Leave us some comments. If you've got any questions for Anna, just leave them in the comment box. I'll make sure she gets them. And until next time on Finding Your Range, keep moving.